Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And a couple things in the news. One thing that's not escaping us, and that is obviously the coronavirus, and in this case, the economy. Trump initially, and I kind of believed it, many people did, that it was going to be a V-shaped recovery. Now, many experts are saying that's not going to happen, and it could take years to get these jobs back.
I tend not to think that it's going to take years to get the jobs back. I think it's, depending on what segment you look at. If you're talking about overall jobs, GDP, something like that, I think we're looking at more of a U-shaped recovery at this point, where it will be at the bottom for longer, but it's still not going to be
How
terrible.
long is long for you?
I think we're going to start seeing the results of the stimulus, the results of reopening by the end of the summer. We're not going to have all the jobs back by the end of the summer by any means. But okay. I think things will be on the uptick at that point. In terms of the market, I think you're going to see a W where it's bouncing up. It's going to hit bottom again. It's going to bounce back up because the volatility on the market is going to be fantastic. It's just
I would agree with that.
Crazy.
Yes. I see more of a, I hate to say this, more of a protracted situation. I just do. I'm sorry. I don't want this to happen. I just do. I think, those restaurants, other people, companies, people, 70% of companies think that they're going to, that things are going to be okay and that we're going to have, the people that got laid off to think that everything's going to be okay. And 70% of them say we're going to be back to work. I completely disagree. Completely. I think it could take a long time.
Again, I don't think it's going to take that. It's not going to be push a button and everything's back to normal. As much as we would like that, that's not going to happen. But most businesses are going to rehire the folks that let go. Where you're going to see losses and where there's going to be a problem is in small business. Small business is going to take the biggest hit. Larger businesses will be able to bounce back. But what you have to remember is larger businesses still maintain the bulk of employment. Like using Connecticut as an example, 50% of all businesses in Connecticut count as small businesses. However, the 50% that are considered large businesses account for 98% of the employment.
Which makes sense, yes.
So you're seeing that 98% is going to be bouncing back fairly quickly. It's the 2% of the employment that we may have a lot of problems with. Are we talking about years of recovery? I doubt it, especially as a vaccine and more cures start coming out. If we can actually get a vaccine by the end of the year, 2021 is going to be amazing economically. Again, if we have a vaccine.
I could not agree more. As soon as there's a vaccine, it will be Katie by the door. It would be an expansion that would rival anything. Okay? Yes, it would rival anything. However, yes. However, I think that that's still very much in play, correct?
Well, yes, it's still in play. There are right now 14 vaccines, different vaccines being explored, 8 of them here in the U.S. Trump has introduced Operation Warp Speed, which has the military, the scientists, and the pharmaceutical companies all working together to get these vaccines done as quickly as possible. So they'll be finding out which of them actually work faster. You know, the naysayers always say, oh, well, you know, the fastest vaccine anybody came up with was the mumps, and that was 4 years. But that was also 1960. We have never had a situation where all of these different groups are working together. And we've also never had the level of technology that we have right now. We have a biotech company, unfortunately, I'm blanking on the name of it, that is dealing solely with RNA technology and how to use messenger RNA to trick the body's own immune system into counteracting the virus. We've never been able to even consider things like that before.
True. Yes, I agree. But, you know, it's all about, let's say it is a year from now. What do you think is going to happen?
I think,
about
well,
the economy.
You're already seeing states reopen. They're going to reopen cautiously. I think as people start getting out, yes, you're going to see another, minor, probably minor uptick in cases of coronavirus. But
well, let's talk about that, Lopkin. No, hold
here's
on,
what people need to remember. Right now, the odds of your getting a fatal case of coronavirus is under 1/1000%.
Okay, but let's just talk about that just for 1 second. If there is a second wave, I hate to be pessimistic, Dr. Lopkin. I think that's going to throw things in a tailspin.
I don't think it'll throw things into a tailspin. If there's a second wave, we're going to have to backtrack, and we'll probably most likely backtrack to about where we are now. But that's also going to be a lot more short-lived because again, right now, we already have emergency approval for Rendezvir. So as production of that ramps up, even if you see more people being hospitalized, you're going to see more of those people recover because they've got the medication. Again, that's going to take a little while for production to ramp up, but certainly by the end of the summer, the companies have said anybody who needs it is going to be able to get it.
Okay, so, you know, I guess, I don't know, to me, I just see that, you know, all the attrition in jobs and everything else, I just, you know, I wish I could see it. I wish I could see it. I just kind of don't. But, you know, I'll leave it up to you. You know, I'll leave it up to you, Dr. Lopkin. I think there's so many variables we don't know. Correct? You got to agree with me on that.
There are definitely a lot of variables, and nobody's ever going to know all of them. This is a situation that we have not seen in our lifetime. There is historical evidence of certain things to go about. The biggest thing we need is good data. Unfortunately, we have gone into this with terrible data. We did not have enough testing here in the U.S. Most countries did not have enough testing. The numbers that came out of China and the numbers that came out of the World Health Organization have been proven to be absolute nonsense. The data was fraudulent. So we went into this literally not even knowing what we thought we knew.
Well, let me ask you another question about that, Dr. Lopkin, because again, you know, this, I know it sounds crazy, but what can I tell you? I'm starting to think more and more we overreacted. I think, you know, in many
cases we did.
I mean, we shut down an entire economy, and people don't realize, or many people don't realize, especially the intelligentsia that is, you know, doing this. in other words, calling for everyone to shut down. Do you know what the social and psychological costs of people losing their livelihood, people staying at home for who knows how long? I mean, it outnumbers the cost of the virus.
The psychological cost has been huge. The economic cost has been huge. And I keep pointing out to people who are yelling, "Oh, we're reopening too soon." Before you complain that we're reopening too soon, put yourself in the place of somebody whose business was forced to close down, did not get unemployment benefits because many of the states are just issuing money now. So there's been shutdowns for 2 months and people have had zero income. Their bills are piling up. They can't afford food. On the live version of Carnivore Radio, we spoke a few weeks ago with folks from Food Share who were talking about the sheer numbers of people who needed help feeding themselves that never imagined themselves in this situation. So it's not a matter of people putting money above people's lives. It's people going hungry versus people dying from coronavirus. And the fact of the matter is,
right now, and either like suicide rates are up, people going hungry, people losing their business, people losing their dreams. It outnumbers 150,000, which is about the latest figure from deaths and what have you.
Oh, it far outnumbers it. The last number I got, and this is a few weeks ago, so it's probably more by now, was 17 million families. Now, if you assume that the average family has at least 3 people, you're talking over 54 million people versus 150,000 who got coronavirus and passed away. Now, I'm not saying that somebody passing away from coronavirus is not a tragedy. It is. But it's a tragedy of 150,000 people dealt with rather than the tragedy of starving, which 54 million people are dealing with. And we know for a fact that we overreacted in every aspect of this because Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York, had estimated they needed 200 to 300 respirators every day. A few weeks ago, he came out and said, "Oh, no, we didn't need 200 to 300 respirators. We only needed about 100 respirators a day." So they were stockpiling all of these respirators, and people are going, well, it's better for them to have them and not need them. But it isn't, because those respirators could have gone to hospitals in other cities and helped people that needed them.
No, I would agree with that 100%. And I still say if this thing goes on for an extended period of time, there may not be an economy to come home to. I mean, that is still, I'm sorry, a real danger.
If we don't reopen, that is a real danger. But we're already starting to see states reopen. 17 states have started their reopen processes. I believe another 10 are reopening next week or the week after. So you're already starting. We're starting to realize that the country is not homogenous. And I've been saying this for a while. New York City is not going to reopen for a while. Most of California is not going to reopen for a while. But the Midwest, Montana, Wyoming, even the Northeast, where you're seeing fewer and fewer cases outside of New York City, these areas can start the reopen process. It has to be done carefully. You can't just say, okay, everybody go out. But if it's managed properly, we will have that U-shaped revival. And I would say by the end of the summer, you're going to start seeing recovery. By the fall, unless the fall is a big question mark right now because people are talking about the potential of a second wave in the fall.
again, and that's the only thing we really kind of differ on, Dr. Lopkin, is I'd have to say if there's a resurgence in the fall, this could be a protracted, dire situation.
If it's, see, again, I think it'll be protracted. I don't think it'll be dire. If there's a second wave in the fall and we get a vaccine, say November, December, then by next February, we'll be on the upswing. And since people will be getting vaccinated, that will be the recovery.
And what do you think the probability of us getting a vaccine within, well, I guess that's 6 months, so to speak, yeah.
Given the progress they've made so far, I say I think the odds are very good. And something else, everybody's making a big deal about a vaccine. Everybody is saying, well, until we have a vaccine, it's still going to be a problem. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Rendezvir was a great first step, but that's a medication that only goes to those people that have it severely and are hospitalized. If we can come up with something like Rendezvir that people can take when they're first diagnosed before it gets bad, like Tamiflu as an example for the regular flu.
Mm-hmm.
If we get something like that, we're going to be on our way to recovery.
I would agree.
It's not necessarily a vaccine. A treatment, I think, will have the same effect.
Yeah, some real treatment. I think the chloroquine, whatever the first one that was touted, not really all that petered out a little bit. Better than nothing, but certainly not a magic bullet. I do agree with you. If there's some kind of treatments, vaccine, if things look a little more positive, I do think we overreacted. I think the quarantine, in the end, probably should have been a month quarantine, but this can't go on forever. Switching gears, I'm more and more intrigued about the Flynn situation. It's a little scary as an American that our former president, I have to say, unless you're delusional, was directly involved.
Yeah,
in the overthrow of another duly elected president. I believe that's really not going out on a limb. That to me is very scary.
It's terrifying. The evidence does say Obama was involved in what was going on, and now you have judges overstepping their bounds because the Justice Department is trying to drop all of the charges. Since they're the ones that brought charges, they have the full ability to do that, and a judge just stepped in and said, no, you can't drop the charges yet. Well, a judge doesn't actually have that ability, and on appeal, that'll be overturned.
Yeah, but what the crime he supposedly did, nothing.
Yeah, no,
he lied. It's like me asking
he was
you.
Right, he was accused of lying to the FBI. So that is obstruction of justice. It's, there's another technical term that I'm blanking on at the moment, but realistically, I mean, every defendant in every case lies to the cops. They tell the cops what's best for them. Nobody has ever been prosecuted like this for trying to protect their own interests without proving an underlying crime.
That's the big thing. Do you think there's any repercussions? I don't see any at all.
I don't know if there's going to be any serious repercussions politically. I do think if the Justice Department cannot drop the charges, this is going to go to the Supreme Court. And we saw the Supreme Court look at a related case with Trump's taxes yesterday. And most of the conservative justices expressed grave concern over what this means for the abuse of power. Yes, Congress has the ability to oversee the president. It's the whole balance of power. But what the justices brought up yesterday is, when does that oversight become harassment. And it's fairly obvious that this entire thing was calculated to harass and try to depose a sitting president.
I would agree. I always have to ask you this. I can't help it. Given what we've all talked about, especially with the economic situation, what do you now give Trump's reelection odds at?
Right now, I still put his odds at 60%. I don't know that anything's really going to change those odds until after both parties have their conventions and the campaigns begin in earnest.
So you couldn't attach odds at this point?
No, again, I think the odds are Trump will still win. I give him 60%. And I think that's nothing. I don't think anything's going to change those odds until the campaigns start in earnest at the end of August.
I wouldn't argue with that. Very good. Anything else, Dr. Lopkin?
No, I think, as everybody gets ready to reopen, I think it's still important for people to remember to be careful, be safe, and follow the guidelines that are set forth. Wear the masks inside when you're dealing with other people. Outside, if you are distanced, the masks are actually counterproductive as long as you're not getting close to people. But that's really it. I mean, keep your distance. And there's no reason that, I've heard from a couple of people, there's no reason not to get together with folks as long as you're staying, 8 feet apart on different ends of a picnic table. You can talk, but be sensible.
I think sensibility is the key to Carnivore Bites, and you have a great show coming up this Friday for our live Carnivore Radio podcast.
Yep, Friday at 4. You can catch us at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. We'll be talking live with a performance coach about how you can prepare yourself for the reopening of businesses and a return to what people are referring to as the new normal.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank you for our listeners. We'll do it again next week.
See you then.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.